And I think we're live.
We are, I believe. Hello.
We're back again, back again. Just trying to see if it'll pop up. Yeah, so welcome.
And I think we're live.
We are, I believe. Feedback.
We definitely were live there for a second. My phone too, it went right to my phone. Hi everyone, welcome back again for another episode of Queer Confab. I am so excited to get to talk to you guys again with my lovely guest who I will introduce in a sec. So today we are chatting about conversion therapy. So conversion therapy is a practice of attempting to change individuals' sexual orientation or gender identity / expression. It's been used since around the 1930s by pseudoscientists, shall we call them PC term, with methods such as brain surgery, aversion therapy, and hormonal castration have been used on the LGBTQIA members, particularly by religious groups in order for them to align with more heteronormative ideals instead. So today we're just going to discuss a little bit about what conversion therapy is, etc., and where it's banned, where it's legal, and just a few other tidbits in between. But before we get to that, I'm now going to introduce you to our wonderful guest who we also had last week. Edward, would you like to say a little bit about yourself?
Yes. Hello, I'm Edward Dickens. I am a long-time friend of our gracious host, Madam Zoe here, and I've done some theatre-y stuff in the past with her as well. These days, I'm training to be a priest in the Scottish Episcopal Church. So I think last week I used the technical term ordinand. So in the interest of consistency, I will tell you that again.
Perfect. So just to get us started, just chill. Do you have any experience with conversion therapy? Do you know anyone that's ever gone through it? Have you heard about it maybe through the church? What is your what's your stuff there?
Fortunately and mercifully, conversion therapy is not something that has been practiced as a normative practice in the Episcopal Church, to my knowledge, ever. I'm sure it has happened, but when it's happened hush hush and behind closed doors. There's not been like advertised, come and stop being gay, come to our retreat thing and you will become straight type conversion therapy. Me personally, no either, but what I will say is that my religion or my faith has never led me to wish to stop being gay, but certainly when I was younger and first started to realize, oh, this is what I am. Oh yes, sorry, it should have said in the introduction, gay man here. I do remember from time to time thinking just like, why couldn't I be straight?
Yeah,
because it would be so much easier. Can't I just press a button, or can't there just be a way to make me straight? And of course, I knew even then that there wasn't. And nowadays, that's unthinkable to me. I'm very happy with who I am. But it is interesting because I think I've read somewhere, and you're the stats person, so I won't try on your toes too much. But I think I've read somewhere that people who were raised in a religious background but themselves are not actually religious are more likely to volunteer for conversion therapy than people who are openly gay, for example, and also an actively practicing religious person. I could be totally wrong about that, though. That's just something I have in the back of my mind.
Yeah. Perfect. I have to say, personally, I don't have any experience with conversion therapy. I've never had to, well, up until recently, I didn't even know, that I wasn't straight. So I've never had to really think about that kind of thing, or I don't really have many, I would say, highly religious friends apart from yourself, actually. I'm an ex-member of the church. I did used to go to church myself. As someone who attended. It was never mentioned in my church, and I went to a couple, and in fact I don't see it really being in any of the churches that I attended, or any of the people that I attended with. I don't see that being a thing with those.
I think certainly as far as Christianity is concerned, I think even on a global scale, mainstream churches, so what they would say in America they would call mainline Protestants, so that's your Presbyterians, Anglicans, Episcopalians, Lutherans, Methodists, that sort, and also Roman Catholics. That would be like the mainstream Christians. Globally, I think generally it's a practice that as I say, has never been done. Certainly, it's never been publicly advertised as something that we should do and we can do to help you. It's something that's been done by more fundamentally, extreme or fundamental. I was going to be politically correct and say fundamentalist, but no, extreme.
Or extreme I can totally see that, to be fair. It's always the extreme side of something, isn't it? So we're going to chat a little bit about what conversion therapy actually is. I didn't know that. So I actually just assumed that conversion therapy was just the electroshock. But when I was reading up on it, I actually found out that that's one type of conversion therapy. Conversion therapy is the all umbrella term for trying to switch people around to heteronormative ideals. And I didn't also realize that there were two different change efforts, should we say. So I found that we have sexual orientation change efforts and gender identity change efforts, which, as we know, are two different things. Funnily enough, I was actually seeing comments on Facebook recently under something about.
I believe I saw your comments, but please go on. Yes,
about the gender of pansexuality, and those are two different things. Sexuality, sexual orientation, and gender identity are two very different things. Sexual orientation is who you like, and gender identity is who you are. That's
clues in the name.
Yes, exactly. So yes, I was looking into that, and I found that there were quite a few different types of therapy, actually. Most of them seem like modern day torture to me, if I'm perfectly honest. Not even modern day torture, these were used in the olden days as well. I don't know how many places these methods are still used in, but from what I saw, aversion therapy was the use of like electric shock and like nausea-induced drugs and stuff like that. It made me think very much of Clockwork Orange.
Sure.
When I was reading into it, like that's it. If you don't know what Clockwork Orange is, it's a very brutal film based on, I think it was a play or a book originally.
It was a book first and then a play.
Very, very brutal. I enjoyed it, but I also very much enjoy psychology, which is why I enjoyed that. It was very much classical conditioning, etc.
I would also recommend it. Great watch.
Just be wary. Lots of trigger warnings on that.
Trigger warning for just about everything you could possibly have, incidentally.
But so it was those sort of things that would try and either shock it out of you or make you feel so sick if like for any like homosexual thought you might have had, that every time you think of these things you'll then start to be sick, basically. I don't know much about the history. I don't know what you may know about aversion therapies or anything that you want to really highlight with that method.
I have to say, that the actual methods behind it, for whatever reason, is not something that I'd ever given a great deal of thought to. I won't expound too much just now on what I had given thought to, because I know we'll touch on it as we go on. But the actual methods behind it is not something I'd hugely thought about. But if I were going to be a horrible person that wanted someone to stop doing something, then aversion therapy, which I don't, apart from really horrible things that people really should know better about. But then of course, some horrible people would say that about homosexuality and people's gender identities as well. They would say that's a horrible thing that you need to stop doing, which of course it's not my
stop doing that. Pain.
Pain. Exactly.
See, it says here that it was actually developed in Czechoslovakia between 1950 and 1962, which is interesting. I didn't know. It's also very much giving me. It didn't work very well, but some of us still decided to do it. And the whole like electric shock thing, like, oh, do you remember the very creepy sequel to Wizard of Oz, Return to Oz?
Yes. Oh my God. Yeah.
That's what that bit reminds me of.
Yeah.
That film's terrifying.
That's really interesting, actually, that it came from Czechoslovakia, because earlier than the 50s, this is something that just popped into my head just now, and it's not exactly conversion therapy. In fact, it's almost the opposite of it. But earlier than the 50s, I want to say the 1930s or 20s, and I'm pretty sure it was Czechoslovakia, but if it wasn't Czechoslovakia, it was Romania. They actually, they, like most countries at the time, did not allow any kind of LGBT plus folks to serve openly in the military. So, and the most common disbarment for that was gay men. So a common way of getting out of national service, i.e. being called up to the army, was claiming to be gay. The army actually made a machine where they would show you different types of porn, and measure whether you were aroused or not, to determine whether or not you were gay. Yeah, but the thing,
like a tape measure, like
I think, I'm not exactly sure how they measured it, but the other thing is it always struck me as not particularly scientific, because I mean, you could be aroused by your own thoughts. You could not be aroused by any of it because you're embarrassed by what you're going through and things like that.
That's very true. I mean, most of the time, you know, if or not I do partake in viewing pleasures, most of the time I'm not even sat thinking about what and gets away with the fate. It could be anything. You don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, as I say, I think that was in Czechoslovakia, I'm pretty sure. And so it's interesting that they went on to pioneer, for lack of a much better word, the electroshock aversion therapy.
It's just so everyone knows, if you are watching along with us, please feel free. I will be checking the comments periodically. If you want to sound off in there, anything like your own opinions or anything you want us to talk about, feel free, and we will absolutely bring it up and chat a little bit about it. Unless it's like really bad, then maybe not. Another version I saw of conversion therapy was to do with brain surgeries, so like lobotomies and stuff like that. Where I don't think they're done now. I don't think so. I think electroshock still is in some circumstances. Yeah, I feel like electroshock still is like a possible thing, but I really hope. I mean, I wish none of it was. I'm actually just gonna do a quick Google while we chat about that.
Yeah, I'm afraid to say I sadly wouldn't be surprised if lobotomy for the purposes of quote unquote mental health is still practiced in parts of the world. In fact, as I say, I suspect it is. I just hope it isn't. And I'm not aware for certain of any of it. But I think certainly it sort of fell out of favor when people realized that you can't just open up someone's head and just start chopping bits off and hope that's going to work.
They for like for mental health, but it's like they thought it was like getting rid of the demons, like letting them out.
Trepanning, that's another one. Yeah,
trepanning.
Yeah, trepanning is drilling a hole in the skull to let bad forces of some kind out of the mind or out of the head. Interestingly, another quick aside while you're Googling, the very first surgery ever invented in many ancient cultures practiced trepanning for religious reasons, as well as medical ones, real and imagined. And it was actually you were quite likely to survive it in a lot of ancient cultures, where there's quite a lot of skulls where there's clearly been an opening made, and then eventually it's healed and the person's lived a long time after that, which is kind of amazing. But anyway, sorry, aside.
Yeah, no, from what I can see, obviously conversion therapy is still very much a thing.
Yes.
But nothing much about lobotomies in the this side of the century anyway.
Yes. Well, yeah.
Yeah, but I can't find anything like solid at the moment. What else? What other types of conversion therapies that we have? Oh, castration, which sounds like a bundle of fun. So a lot of it is to do with like chemical castration and stuff like that. And from what I'm reading, a lot of it seemed to take place in Nazi Germany.
I believe that a lot of it did happen in Nazi Germany, and we should be ashamed to admit, and I think we are, that it did take place in this country as well. Very famously, Alan Turing, the war hero who helped not just crack the Enigma code and therefore help the Allies win World War II, but is also largely responsible for the invention of modern computers, was a gay man, and he was forcibly chemically castrated.
I did not know that. No, I had no.
And he went on to do something very bad that I probably shouldn't say the name of because we're on YouTube, but people can.
I'm sure people can search up if they
exactly. Yeah.
For sure. That's just like, and these extreme methods just seem like to change who a person is because of who they are.
Yeah.
Like we're supposed to be so against like torture and stuff like that. You know, there's so many people fighting to like for people to not be tortured in certain situations, and these are the types of things that I would imagine on like a TV show, like with mental extreme terrorists, you know, trying to get information out of them, not with normal everyday people just trying to live their lives as who they are.
It is particularly bizarre, especially when you consider that it was supposed to be ostensibly done from and in fact I'm personally happy to give them the benefit of the doubt and say that it was being done with the notion of we are helping you. You know, Nazi Germany and in Czechoslovakia are both interesting examples, because obviously the period that you were talking about in Czechoslovakia was under the Warsaw Pact era after World War II, and certainly both Soviet-style communism and certainly Nazi fascism both regarded it as this sort of bourgeois aberration. You couldn't be a trans person, or you couldn't be a homosexual person if you were a normal person, and the existence of those aberrations came about from having too much money and security in your life, which where's my money? Where's my money, Hitler?
I mean, it might be a bit late to ask him now.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So Tom said in the comments, I ended up having a long conversation about castration with regard to both Turing and castrati. It really stunted bodily development. Why would you go to this point to change someone? That's a very good question. That is one that we're currently asking while having this conversation. Why would you go to these methods? Obviously, as you were saying, like back in the olden days, before our time, these were things that homosexuality and different gender identities were not even an afterthought at that point. But homosexuality was totally seen as something was wrong with the person. For them, it was seen as disgusting and that's a bad thing, we don't want that. So it was seen as a way to help people, and I can understand that, but the fact that it still goes on now is it's the fact that it's ongoing, and it's the lengths achieved, or the lengths undergone, isn't it? I mean, like castrati, like Tom was saying, I mean that's for those that don't know, castrating a boy in usually pre-puberty or very early puberty in order to change their physiology so they will end up with a certain voice type, which doesn't always happen anyway. And that was a common practice throughout history. The last one time that it happened,
it was in Italy in the 19th century, and in fact, there's actually a few recordings of one of the last castrati because he lived long enough into the 20th century that they could be recordings made. And so it's very eerie stuff to listen to. He's a fabulous singer, but totally against his will, and I'm sure he would have been a fabulous singer irrespective of what voice type he ended up with.
Yeah. I didn't realize that you could do that in order to get a voice type.
Well, as I say, it didn't always work, and it was also a horrible thought. So yeah.
Not the number one thing that I would want to happen in order to attempt to maybe change my voice.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed. So some of the less mean, brutal, violent types that are listed here is ex-gay/ex-trans ministry, which I suppose is people that have gone through these therapies and have then come out the other side to then talk to people and help them through, the sinfulness of their beliefs and their lives, etc., which in comparison to the other ones seems more tame.
It's still bad, but it's certainly
but more humane.
Definitely.
Also hypnosis was another one, and psychoanalysis, which, if people don't know, that is a Freudian type of psychology. One thing that I actually kind of do know about, it's all about the unconscious mind and treating the unconscious mind and trying to bring things to the forefront, and trying to almost change the unconscious. The unconscious mind is not just like you fainting and not being able to do anything because you're completely knocked out, but what's behind your forefront, your frontal conscience, like what's going on, and this is going on. It's all the things kind of behind. If you look at a depiction of an iceberg, which they love to use, it's everything that's underneath the water. So everything on top is your frontal conscience, your main conscience, and everything underneath is that unconscious that you don't know about, and trying to use that to change things and go along those lines. A lot of what Freud has put forward has been disproven, or has not disproven, but there's a lot of evidence to refute some of what.
I always think it's really interesting that the psychoanalysis methods that he developed have not just been not discredited, but are in fact still used. It's the findings that he purported to have found through the use of the methods that are, I mean, his opinions on what I don't know if he ever wrote anything on the subject of transgender identity, but I don't think he did. But I know
sexuality he did.
Yes, and his explanation for what causes homosexuality in men and women is very strange. You other people can look it up if they want to, but I'm not sure how it came to him.
I think that might be it was so Freud is a stranger. He's definitely a pseudoscientist, which basically means people putting these things forward as facts, but there's no actual way to scientifically prove them. A lot of his ideals were more like, it could be due to this, but there's no way I can prove that. It's all about
I have to admire the hustle in some ways, that he's just like, I think this is probably it, and no one's got a better idea. So
it's not.
Exactly.
Because it can't be scientifically proven or properly supported. It also can't be scientifically.
Exactly.
So there is a lot of evidence to say that what his where he was going with things wasn't 100% on the ball. But anyways, psychoanalysis, yes, using that as a form of therapy, and then reparative therapy, which some people think is a similar thing, but it's supposedly a thing within itself. It says here that it's supposed to be a specific kind of therapy. Which one, I'm unsure. Associated with the psychologists Elizabeth Moberly and Joseph Nicolosi. I don't know if I'm saying that right. The term reparative refers to Nicolosi's postulate that the same-sex attraction is a person's unconscious attempt to self-repair feelings of inferiority. So similar to, again, the unconscious there. I wouldn't agree with that.
No, neither would I. It's also makes for particularly grim thinking. Yeah. Also,
you're gay because you feel bad about yourself.
Almost horror novel levels of grim, actually, when you start to think about the implications of that particular idea.
And then the last one listed here is marriage therapy.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, which can you explain to me a little bit what marriage therapy is?
I think to my knowledge, it's just the notion that they pair up, let's say, it's something that a lot of ex-gay ministries, as they like to call themselves, will do, where they pair up a gay man and a lesbian woman, and do arranged marriages happen? Do forced marriages happen? Yes, I'm sure they do. But to my knowledge, a lot of these are also voluntary, because in a lot of cases, often for horrible reasons, people involved in these ex-gay ministries, in terms of undergoing the treatment, have volunteered themselves to be there. So they actually will go through a dating process and actually find someone and marry them and have children with them. And almost always 20 years down the line, one of them goes, yeah, well, I'm still gay, this isn't working, goodbye. Yes.
You know what film I've been I keep referencing films in this because I feel like it's just but I'm a cheerleader. I keep thinking about that, you know, where she goes off to this that makes me think like that. That's, I suppose that is a kind of conversion therapy.
I mean, a lot of these things, certainly, I don't think anymore, but certainly in the latter part of the 20th century, a lot of these ex-gay ministries were done through things like summer camps and things like that. I know it's regarded as such a stereotypical and hackneyed phrase today that I think a lot of people don't actually appreciate that at one time it was actually a slogan that some Christians in particular used, which was "pray the gay away." That is your therapy. That is your therapy. You just keep praying and you will become straight. On the subject quickly of ex-gay ministries, I touched on this last week. I just want to say quite quickly that interestingly, some of them actually accept the scientific veracity that someone is born in a sexual orientation and cannot change that. Some of them actually will accept that. So they don't claim to stop you from being gay because they know they can't change that. They claim that they stop you acting on your homosexual urges and give you new, healthier sexual urges on top of your existing sexual orientation. So when you actually think about what they're saying, they're actually not saying we're healing you. They're saying we are damaging you, but it's okay.
It's fine. And just to say, as someone who has had a lot of heterosexual relations, it ain't that healthy. It's actually a bit of a shit show.
No comment, please.
So that was a bit about the types of conversion therapies, which I hope has helped people kind of get not educated but learn more information on that, because I sure as hell did not know any of this. Moving on from that, I think it would be good to discuss, do you believe that conversion therapy should be banned? Do you believe that, maybe sometimes it's fine for people, or do you believe, hey, no, it's basically torture, maybe we shouldn't do that? What do you think?
Yes, it should be banned. I think I ordinarily would not come out so strongly and say just with a blanket statement like that. But the issue is that so many different, all of the methods, in fact, cause great damage in one way or another. And so often it is done through coercion, even in the example of ex-gay ministries, where people often volunteer themselves because they genuinely feel self-loathing about their sexual orientation. Where has that self-loathing come from? Either it's come from past trauma, or it's something much more deep-seated within themselves, in which case they need help for the self-loathing, not for their sexual orientation. And that would be exploiting a mentally vulnerable person. So yes, banned.
Banned, maybe Queen. We like Queen.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was a bad joke. I am also in agreement. I do think that conversion therapy should be just completely obliterated, banned. Like, how are you going to tell someone, hey, you have to change, and let's do that by shocking you and electrocuting you and maybe drilling a hole through your skull, or, you know, like just telling you how terrible you are. Like, for you to say that.
As we say, I mean, there are so, you know, more, like, for lack of a better word, more humane methods of it, like stuff like ex-gay ministries, which often involve marriage therapy and things like that. But as I say, the people that get involved in those are often extremely vulnerable. So that then raises issues beyond safeguarding and of morality itself. So
yeah, and I suppose that comes into play with the what about those people that have consented? Like, are we able to really tell them that they can't do that? And from what I was reading, you know, the act, it results in harm of a significant level, and there's also a complete power imbalance between the person who is receiving the conversion therapy and the person who is giving the conversion therapy. They're usually of, you know, like higher stature, etc. And there's a lot of manipulation, I would say, for lack of a better term, to get, and like you were saying, coercion, you know, to get them to a point where they feel so terribly about themselves and and who they are, that they think their only way out is to be converted into heterosexual.
Which is even worse when like I was saying a moment ago, a lot of these ex-gay ministries admit that they can't actually do that. So yeah,
and these kind of things, again, from what I was reading, they can result in major mental health consequences, like severe depression, PTSD, anxiety, and stuff like that. Which is funny because I've never had conversion therapy, and I seem to have all of those. So
yeah, we could, same. Anyway, go on.
Definite extremes, like they can totally fuck up someone's psyche, you know. And speaking of that, I think we should discuss about the effectiveness. You know, people want to put these conversion therapies forward. Are they effective? Is there any evidence to say that they're effective? I don't know what you know yourself, Edward. If you know of any, like, you know, case studies or anything like that. Effectiveness.
I know that. I know that there are many, and I think it tends to be people who are, it tends to be people who are motivated by religious belief, and I mean genuine religious belief and not self-loathing. Now, you know, I mentioned this last week, so I'll keep this redredging up very brief. I do not share this view, but there are Christians, there are in fact many Christians and indeed of all religions who hold the view that whilst there's nothing wrong with being gay, apart from God doesn't like it. Why doesn't God like it? I don't know. That's what he said, so we just have to accept that. Again, not my view, but I am aware of quite a high instance of success with ex-gay ministries, and certainly the less, maybe not with the torture forms of the more barbaric forms of conversion therapy, because these people aren't engaging in it because I'm gay, that means I'm a horrible person. They're engaging in it because they say, I believe I'm fine, but my behavior is sinful, so I want to stop doing sinful behavior. And they would view it, and I haven't met them personally, but I have seen interviews where people describe it as like giving up smoking. again, strange to get your head around, but I believe people who view it that way are successful. But I would be very hesitant to put it that way. I think people that view it that soberly and logically are very rare, would be my guess. I would say that the more extreme forms of conversion therapy are probably 0% effective, and the more humane forms are probably have quite a high rate of initial effectiveness. But then when you look at what people go on to do with their lives and whether they relapse down the line, as far as I know, it's very, very low rate of effectiveness indeed.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can totally see where you're coming from. I think my mind starts to question, like, are they just saying that they're doing fine?
Yeah.
For sure. But, a couple studies I found, one that was actually done in the UK in 2021, an assessment of the evidence on conversion therapy for sexual orientation and gender identity is the name of this. What did I just call it?
Case study.
Case study. Whoa, my mind just went blank there. So basically, the evidence for conversion therapy to change sexual orientation has been growing over the last 20 years. This is what the case study says. The evidence base for gender identity is much newer, with the earliest study done in 2018. Ooh, earliest in 2018.
Okay.
As a result, the literature is dominated by evidence on conversion therapy for sexual orientation, which is not surprising, because it has been mostly done for sexual orientation over gender identity. That is more of a recent thing now. The main topics of studies into conversion therapy for sexual orientation were participants' experiences of conversion therapy, the outcomes of conversion therapy. For conversion therapy for gender identity, the main topics covered were the scale of conversion therapy among transgender people, participants' experiences of conversion therapy, the outcomes of a conversion therapy. Articles, so it's a literature review from what I can tell. Articles were reviewed using a standardized assessment approach, with each study scored on a spectrum from high to average to low, including points in between. Most of the studies were assessed as being around average quality. However, the quality of the overall evidence base is lowered by the lack of robust sampling and design in the quantitative studies. That means numbers. Quantitative is numeric. This is because the sample frame of people who have undergone conversion therapy does not exist. Interesting. There were a small number of studies for conversion therapy for gender identity, and they were assessed as being stronger in design than those for sexual orientation. I wonder if that's because of how newer, like this.
That's what I was thinking.
There was more, thought put into it. This is due to the fact that two of the studies were based on large-scale national surveys. Obviously, that does come into fact. So the main findings of this study were that there's no robust evidence that conversion therapy can achieve its stated therapeutic aim of changing sexual orientation or gender. The types of practices tend to be similar for conversion therapy for sexual orientation and for gender identity. For example, talking therapies delivered by faith groups or mental health professionals, because I forget there are some mental health professionals that do put forward that they will do conversion therapy type therapies. Conversion therapies were associated with self-reported harms among research participants who'd experienced conversion therapy for sexual orientation and for gender identity. For example, negative mental health effects like depression and feeling suicidal. There's an indicative evidence from surveys that transgender respondents were as likely or more likely to be offered and receive conversion therapy than non-transgender, lesbian, gay, or bisexual respondents. So how do you feel about any of those particular findings?
It's very interesting. I have a hunch, like you say, that it's to do with it being a slightly newer discipline, if you will. The thought just popped into my head. It was because we were just speaking about effectiveness, that it might actually be easier to successfully undergo conversion therapy for gender than for sexual orientation. That successfully in massive air quotes. The reason, because I was just thinking, for example, if someone identifies and is gender fluid, then it doesn't take much to browbeat them or coerce them to a point where they believe that they are no longer gender fluid and they're just now one gender, whichever gender that is. So I suspect they might see a higher rate of success as a result of things like that. But of course, that's immoral in and of itself, because you shouldn't be browbeating or coercing anyone about anything.
No, exactly. Yeah, and I do think it's really interesting the transgender respondents over the non gender identity. It seems to be, just interesting to see. I don't know how many times I can say interesting in one sitting. But yeah, that whole reminder of like there are mental health professionals as well as religious groups that will put forward these kind of ideals and ideologies.
Just deeply, deeply, deeply concerning.
Yeah, just a little bit. There are more sort of case studies in that I was looking at, or should I say, not case studies, but evidence supporting the fact that they may not be so effective. It's not to say that I wasn't looking for evidence to support the fact that it is effective. When I was trying to research this, I was finding just more evidence for the former than the latter. It was a real struggle unless it was put forward by a religious group itself to say, hey, we did great with this. Which I felt was more biased, whereas I was trying to look for more unbiased. That last case study that I found was actually gov.co.uk, which is supposed to be unbiased, which we hope. But compared to website,
it's not as good as a peer-reviewed study, but it's certainly better than a group with an agenda.
Yes, and this other website that I found is Human Rights Campaign,
right?
Which obviously does have the side that it sits at, but I feel many times have looked at both sides of situations for being human rights, and if if it's infringing on human rights, of course they're going to be like, hey, maybe this ain't great. So let's see, what did I find? So the American Academy of Pediatrics, according to here, confusion about sexual orientation is not unusual during adolescence. Counseling may be helpful for young people who are uncertain about their sexual orientation, or for those who are uncertain about how to express their sexuality and might profit from an attempt at clarification through counseling or a psychotherapeutic initiative. Therapy directed specifically at changing sexual orientation is contraindicated. Can't read. I can't read that word. Sexual orientation, because it's not contradicted.
Spell it. This is fun now.
NTRAINDICATED.
Sorry, I did not get that. Never mind. Contraindicated. Okay. Yeah. I'm gonna look that up later.
Yeah, maybe. Since it can provoke guilt and anxiety while having little or no potential for achieving changes in orientation. So that was from the American Academy of Pediatrics.
Contraindicate. To suggest or indicate that a particular technique or drug, for example, should not be used in a given case. That's the definition, apparently. Very specific word, but I'm glad I know what it means now.
Let's see what else. There's lots of different, if anyone wants to look in this website, by the way, it's The Lies and Dangers of Efforts to Change Sexual Orientation or Gender Identity by Human Rights Campaign. And there's loads of different like little snippets, synopses of different companies, organizations, and their view and their accreditedness of how effective I was going to say erosion therapy. Conversion therapy is. I mean,
it is an erosion of a kind. Yeah. I think it's very interesting that the note about if a person is struggling to find or accept themselves, then the use of similar methods to help them explore can and often is beneficial.
Absolutely.
But
Yes.
I would have guessed that, and even if I wouldn't have guessed that, that's what I would believe to be the case. But I'm glad to see it in the black and white there, or hear it via you.
Yes, me too.
It's an aspect of therapy and finding self that's often ignored, I think. Anyway.
Yeah. Here, Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, specifically conversion therapy efforts to change an individual's sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. It is a practice that is not supported by credible evidence and has been disavowed by behavioral health experts and associations. Conversion therapy perpetuates outdated views of gender roles and identities, as well as the negative stereotype that being sexual or gender minority or identifying it as LGBTQIA+ is an abnormal aspect of human development. Most importantly, it may put young people at risk of serious harm, which is completely true. Yeah. Constantly telling someone, hey, you're terrible, you shouldn't be the way you are, here will help change you, it's very harmful, especially to those who are impressionable.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so those were just a few tidbits that, like I said, there's many. World Psychiatrists Association, Governor of New York, Governor of New Jersey, where they stand, Governor of California, not Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Sadly.
I know, right? American Academy of Child Adolescent Psychiatry. So this is all very American based with human rights. But yeah, it goes without saying, like anywhere in the world, how conversion therapy is. Or its effects or its ineffectiveness, I would say. So that's I think a good discussion on the effectiveness. What about the argument of it being a cure for homosexuality? How do we feel about that? Or LGBT behaviors.
Yeah, I remember a couple of years ago, I don't think it ended up in their manifesto in the end, but someone senior in hey kids, remember UKIP? Someone in UKIP, some senior person in UKIP, and I think it might well have been Nigel Farage himself, suggested that if they won power, then they wouldn't necessarily criminalize homosexuality, but they would seek to reclassify it as a disorder, and would seek to treat homosexuality. So it's, hang on, so you want to lock me up in a hospital, but you also know you can't cure it, you just want to treat it. So how do you treat it if you're not using conversion therapy? Do you just keep me in a hospital doing nothing, which is probably what would have happened if that had realistically happened? Can it cure homosexuality? Well, I don't know, depends what you mean by cure. If someone feels that their self feels comfortable in their self, but for whatever reason, religious or otherwise, feels that homosexual activity is wrong and has found a way to stop doing that, then okay, yeah, I guess it's cured, but it's not really, is it? Because all the symptom is cured, the symptom being going out and having same-sex relations. If you're still gay, you're still gay,
Gay for life.
Yeah.
So when I think of the word cure, I think it's something that is terrible that needs to be rid of.
Sure.
And when I think that, I think things like, bad diseases, terminal illnesses, which obviously can't be cured, but things that we would like to be able to cure. Homosexual is not one of those. Or even, not being completely straight, because it's not just about those who are homosexual, it's those who are also bisexual or pansexual or gender non-conforming as well. These are not things that I would associate with things as being need to be cured. I have borderline personality disorder, which, as far as I know, does not have a cure. It has ways that you can manage it, but it does not have a cure. However, BPD is a terrible, terrible mental health condition. Whereas usually when I see someone who is not straight and they're in a relationship with someone of the same sex or of gender non-conformingness, they seem pretty happy and pretty content being themselves. I mean, and not all relationships are happy, of course. But I can tell you that it's a far reach.
I think a lot of it's sort of based on the notion that it's not just about the individuals, but is based on the notion that if that through allowing this we somehow debase the entire rest of society. And obviously I don't agree with that. By the way, was in a gay marriage. I'm no longer in a gay marriage, but we didn't fight. That's a complicated thing. Widower. Anyway, happy topics. The notion existed for a long time, this sort of collectivist notion that we can't look at individuals as individuals. We need to look at society as a whole. And in principle, I like that, but of course it has a sinister side to it, like any idea often does, which is that you can use that to say, well, people, in order for society to work, certain forms of individuality are not acceptable. And for a long time, anything deviating from the norm in terms of sexuality or gender identity was seen that this is going to cause societal problems because it's going to drive us further apart. But we've actually discovered that it doesn't. So even if you did think that, the facts aren't there to support it. In fact, it brings us closer together, I would argue.
And on top of that, it's so hard to objectively look at people in society because humans are so subjective.
That's right.
You just base, I totally understand looking at sociological points of view for how society works and how things are this way, but you can't forget, even sociologists will tell you, especially microsociologists will tell you, you can't forget that the person plays a big part. Not every person is going to be the same, and sometimes the people are the ones that affect the establishment rather than the other way around. So you
100%.
can't. It's great to be objective in certain situations. It really is, but you cannot all be objective for everything because humans are so complex. Our emotions are so complex. There's a reason why we're technically top of the food chain. Because we have so many complexities about us, so many different emotions and ideals and beliefs, and it's why we all fucking argue about fucking everything.
And we still don't understand it. We've been trying for millions of years, and we still,
So you can be objective, sure, but there comes a point where you just can't. But yes, it's not a cure for homosexuality, is what I'm trying to say. Just to get back to that. So I think it would be nice to discuss here just for a little bit. Where is conversion therapy actually illegal? Where has it been banned? How would you feel if I told you that only 14 countries have actually banned it?
I would feel annoyed, but I would believe you. I actually thought it might be even less than that. So
14 countries. I will run through the countries that I found that there is some form of national ban, and you might be interested to know some of them actually. So 14 out of 195 countries: Brazil, Samoa, Fiji, Taiwan, Argentina, Uruguay, Ecuador, Germany, Malta, Finland, Chile, India, Canada, France, Ireland, Israel, Norway, and Denmark. However, there are certain provinces in Spain and Australia that have put a ban, and there are currently 20 states in America that have some form of ban on conversion therapy.
A lot of those are very interesting.
I know, right?
Especially the Pacific the Pacific Island nations that you mentioned, these are not societies that tend to be particularly socially liberal, and so it's very interesting that they would be part of the vanguard in this respect. On the other hand, I know they had a lot of, in the 19th and 20th centuries, they had a lot of evangelists turning up from Christian sects that I would regard as being not terribly kosher, if I'm being politically correct. So it's possible that it's something to do with that, because these are cultures where likely homosexuality existed in a way that wasn't, at the very least, not as frowned upon as it would later become. That's possibly an explanation. And certainly the South American ones, the fact there's a lot of Latin American ones that have also banned it is interesting. Of course, we're working on it in this country. We're working on it.
Yeah, for sure.
Maybe not very well, but we're working on it.
We're trying. I think in some ways. I think some countries that didn't surprise me were the likes of like Canada, Norway,
sure.
England. You know, what you call it? I'm just here vibing states.
The more generally progressive ones was what I was going to say, but yeah.
Progressive, normally sitting on the fence, you know, like, I'm not involved. But I can't think of the word for that, and I know there is a word. Neutral. Why? What is wrong with my brain today?
You're fine. Don't worry.
Oh, it's
nothing's wrong with your brain. Zoe, you need to accept yourself. We can't convert you. Sorry.
There's a few things wrong with my brain. It's called mental health issues.
Yeah.
But anyway, so the UK is currently moving towards a ban on conversion therapy. There's been a few things in the news recently about them trying to bring it forward. After years of failed attempts and unkept promises, as this article says, the UK is finally getting closer to banning conversion therapy. I think it's taken us quite a while. However, recently an article published by Pink News, if you're part of the LGBTQ, you probably know who Pink News are. So activists blast Tory conversion therapy consent loophole, saying this will cost many lives. What is this loophole, you may ask? Activists are describing the government's drafted conversions therapy ban bill as meaningless after it was revealed that consensual practices would remain legal if it passed into law. A report from ITV News reveals that the draft bill ending the harmful practices has reached the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's desk after 5 years of consultation. Don't know why it's taken that long, but actually, no, I do. Tory government. It found the bill included conversion therapy related to both sexuality and gender identity after concerns were addressed following Boris Johnson's decision to remove transgender people from the ban proposed by Theresa May in 2018. No surprises there. But the bill reportedly now contains a consent clause, which means those who consent to being subjected to harmful practices would be able to do so legally. Conversion therapy refers to abusive practices that aim to forcibly change a person's sexuality and gender identity, which is impossible in the UK. Most conversion therapy is faith-based. So yes, we're trying to pass it, but we seem to be putting a little loophole in there. And we discussed earlier about, can a person really consent to conversion therapy? So how do we feel about that?
Yeah, I would echo what I said before about if this, in a perfect world, there would be a way to have absolute proof of a person's consent. And we can't have that. We don't know what's going on in their head. We don't know who said what to them. We don't know if there's been some kind of financial incentive, not necessarily for them, but for their family, or any other kind of incentive or coercion. We just don't know. So at the very least, even if it is consensual, it's exploiting vulnerable people and vulnerable groups, in my view. So it isn't really consensual in that.
So do we feel like them passing this bill, although great, banning conversion therapy, but with this loophole, is it just pointless? Like, what is the point in you passing it? Why not just ban it outright?
It's I want to say it's a step, because it is, but at the same time, As we discussed and outlined earlier, the more harmful versions and manifestations of conversion therapy are not really practiced now anyway. So effectively what it said is that we're banning things that were already banned, but if you want to keep doing it, you can.
Yeah, it just seems futile.
It is futile, I think, but and there's a part of me that wants to be annoyed that in essence it's not just futile, it's meaningless gesturing from politicians, but that's what they always do.
Surprise.
Yeah. On the other hand, there's another part of me that wants to say, well, if it gets parliamentarians talking, then maybe they will actually amend or pass a different bill in a few years' time that actually does do it, because that's happened many times in the past as well.
Yeah, if I'm perfectly honest, for like how progressive the UK likes to put themselves as, the fact that it's still not banned in the UK already, volumes to me. I mean, I know I'm not just saying this because I'm Scottish, but I know that in comparison to like England, Scotland has been a lot more progressive when it comes to these things. I'm unsure because obviously anyone who's watching, like, Scotland is a devolved power. We don't actually have all the powers of a proper government. This is because we were getting a bit miffed off with, but that's another thing. So we can't always change laws here depending on what kind of laws they are. So I'm surprised because I'm not sure if Scotland could change this law itself or if the UK needs to change this law.
I think it would come under, my guess would be it would come under health, so Scotland could. But as we saw with
they haven't already.
Yeah, it is surprising. Of course, as we saw with the gender recognition bill, Westminster does have it's been challenged, but yeah, they can block anything from the Scottish Parliament. That's the only time the gender recognition bill's the only time they've done it so far. But it is surprising. I think that there was some clause relating to conversion therapy in the gender recognition bill, I think, because that was a big reason why some people were up in arms about it. I seem to remember. I could be wrong. But you're right. Irrespective of that, you're absolutely right. It is deeply surprising that that Scotland hasn't done it separately, especially considering that there are many, especially in the west of Scotland, there are many people from an evangelical Christian background, and many of these ex-gay ministries that would fall into the consensual bracket, incidentally, would come from an evangelical Christian background. And I'm not saying there's not plenty in England, there are, but there's also a very large concentration of them in the west of Scotland. So it is somewhat bizarre.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell, like, from what I've just Googled here, like, it's definitely not currently banned in Scotland, from what I can see, but there does seem to be a lot of, like, we do want it banned. So it's like, what's the hold up? Is it a UK government thing? Because we've been very quick to jump the gun on a few legislations that have helped the LGBTQIA plus, and we were one of the first to put forward same-sex marriage out of the nations here. By that I mean Scotland, England, Wales, Northern Ireland. So I'm surprised with, like, these kind of things, like, we're not also jumping the gun on them as well. Like, even I could see this one. I could see conversion therapy going even before the whole gender recognition bill. I'm surprised it's not been and gone, sort of thing.
I will admit I didn't do very much, but I did some research of my own for this evening, and this is probably a good time to bring it up. Was that I tried to find publicly advertising either gay conversion therapy services or ex-gay ministries in this country. They're not just difficult to find in this country, they're difficult to find in the English-speaking world, even from America nowadays, which is a great sign. But we know they still exist. I think they generally recruit recruit is perhaps a Freudian slip there, but they generally advertise through church groups and through what I would regard as rather sinister means, through actual charitable efforts, will also say, well, you could also do this. But in terms of, a big flashy brochure and like a campus where they would treat you and so on, like 15 years ago, that was quite common. You can look up like old ex-gay ministry and gay conversion therapy service pamphlets from the US. I can't find them in this country. So it would seem that would suggest that public opinion is more than sufficiently against it to warrant a bill against it. So it is just very surprising.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I think that's been an absolute great chat about conversion therapy. I'm just making sure there's been no other comments on the chat, which there has not. So yeah, we're gonna wrap it up there. It's been fantastic to talk with you again. Edward. As always, it's an absolute pleasure. I don't see you often enough. Is there any final words you want to go out on?
I know it said it last week, but it's still just as applicable. Love one another. Be kind to one another.
Yeah.
Stop being naughty words that I'm not going to say on YouTube Live.
Stop being motherfuckers to each other.
That's the one.
Fuck that. Yeah. I'll do it for you. It's fine.
Thank you, Zoe. You're the host. You can do these things.
Yeah. Boom. Host and also not training to be a minister. Fuck shit, bitch.
I'm sure my bishop wouldn't mind if I said fuck on this stream. Oh fuck, I've said shit. Oh shit, I've said fuck. Oh shit, I've said. Yeah.
Oh fuck. Whoops. Yeah, it's been fantastic chatting with you again. I just want to remind everyone that is watching either live or reruns, we are not experts in any of these topics. We are just people chatting about these things. Opening a dialogue is sometimes the best way to open hearts and open minds. Just having a conversation. You don't always need to argue about things.
I would say it's frequently the best way, I would say.
Absolutely. So that's what we're doing here. We're just opening a dialogue. Chat to your friends about it, chat to your parents about it, chat to your neighbors about it, chat to the random junkie down the street if you really want to. But next week, so this was actually the final Queer Confab, and to the ending of or near ending of Pride Month, which I hope you've all had a wonderful Pride Month this year. Next week we will be starting up again with Dangerous Dialogues, and as far as I'm aware, don't quote me on this, as far as I'm aware, next week we'll be coping with the death. So I hope to see you all there. Trigger warning for that one. By the way, if death is something that does trigger you. And I hope that you've enjoyed this journey of Queer Confab, and you've been okay with me being your host. I've thoroughly enjoyed this, although it's been terrifying every single time, I'm not going to lie. But yes, have a wonderful evening, have a wonderful rest of the Pride Month, wonderful rest of the year, wonderful rest of your life, and we'll see you on the other side. Bye.